In early 2024, a set of specific geopolitical predictions swept across the internet, transforming an unknown commentator named Xuan Zhang into a viral sensation. The predictions laid out a precise sequence of events. Donald Trump would achieve a political resurgence, secure the presidency, and immediately trigger an escalating asymmetrical war with Iran, a war the United States would ultimately lose. When challenged by journalists to defend these claims, the core of the debate bypassed standard foreign policy. Interviewers demanded verifiable evidence and rigorous data to support such definitive outcomes. Zhang's response bypassed the demand for data entirely. He argued that modern education's strict reliance on rigorous fact-checking is actually a liability, claiming it destroys the imagination required to foresee how geopolitical events unfold in reality. This exchange highlights a deep conflict in how global power dynamics are analyzed. It pits traditional positivism, the reliance on empirical, observable data, against an alternative framework Zhang calls speculative analysis. Examining this alternative framework requires taking it apart piece by piece. Doing so reveals the mechanical blind spots in Western intelligence, while also exposing the exact point where predictive modeling collapses into fiction. This logic tree maps the standard positivist model used by modern analysts. You gather discrete data points, pass them through a strict verification filter requiring physical evidence or historical precedent, and only then arrive at a logical conclusion. Zhang's speculative analysis model works differently. It combines three separate disciplines: game theory, historical patterning, and eschatology, to generate an end state it labels truth. Notice that this pathway entirely bypasses the verification filter to reach a prediction. This framework relies on a hard distinction between facts and truth. Facts are defined as independently verifiable pieces of information. Truth is defined as a deep, systemic understanding of reality that operates completely independent of those facts. By treating facts and truth as separate entities, the model introduces a dangerous premise. It suggests that waiting for verifiable evidence actively hinders an analyst's ability to discover what is actually happening. When you remove the requirement for empirical evidence, you create an analytical environment with zero friction. Predictive capability scales infinitely, and the resulting forecasts easily supersede empirical reality. The foundation of this model actually begins within established boundaries. It uses Thucydidean and realism and zero-sum game theory. This maps the United States and Iran as strictly rational actors, each calculating moves to maximize their own interests at the expense of the other. The game board is defined by a severe power imbalance. America enters the conflict with overwhelming technological and financial supremacy. Iran, lacking the capacity for direct military confrontation, must adopt an asymmetric response. Iran's strategy relies on avoiding direct defeat while holding the global economy hostage. By threatening international trade, they apply enough pressure to force diplomatic concessions from a superior military force. This satellite image shows the Strait of Hormuz, the geographical choke point essential to executing that strategy. Controlling this narrow waterway dictates the flow of international shipping. The strategy specifically targets logistical infrastructure. Karg Island, for example, serves as the departure point for 90% of Iranian oil exports. In a zero-sum calculation, these locations dictate the leverage of both states. To counter this, the model predicts the U.S. will deploy an amphibious assault to seize these islands. Because occupying hostile territory nullifies technological advantages, this move logically guarantees an extended guerrilla warfare quagmire. Up to this exact point, the predictions align flawlessly with verifiable data. The logic holds up perfectly under standard, fact-based military analysis. The model also treats domestic politics as a testable variable. It treats a president's executive personnel choices as leading indicators that signal either future escalation or diplomatic off-ramps. Selecting a traditional hawk aligns the administration with the neoconservative establishment. This acts as a signal that the executive branch is fully committing to regime change and expanded conflict in the Middle East. Conversely, elevating an America First loyalist represents the de-escalation pathway. This profile is defined by deep skepticism of imperial overreach and a preference for avoiding foreign entanglements. Appointing intelligence directors who share this anti-interventionist stance further validates the off-ramp strategy. It confirms a structural pivot away from war by placing skeptics in control of national security data. Tracking these personnel appointments provides verifiable facts. It allows an analyst to adjust the geopolitical game board in real time based on observable political shifts. But here is where the framework splinters. Having established a baseline of rational statecraft, the model abandons empirical game theory and crosses over into what it calls predictive history. The first shift relies on historical patterning. This assumes that geopolitical events do not occur as linear, independent reactions to new data, but instead operate on identifiable, repeating cycles. The second and most radical shift is the introduction of eschatology. This requires analyzing political actors based entirely on their final destinies, or end-of-days goals. This mirrors Aristotelian teleology, the philosophical concept that you can only understand a system by identifying the final purpose for which it was built. You judge the present by looking at the intended future. Adopting an eschatological view gives an analyst permission to draw straight lines from the distant past directly into the future. By doing so, they actively ignore the messy, contradictory facts occurring in the present moment. This teleological vector is the exact mechanism that fuels the model's imagination. It provides the intellectual cover needed to make massive speculative leaps without the burden of proof. Conceptually, this framework maps directly onto Plato's allegory of the cave, which argues that observable phenomena are inherently deceptive and obscure true reality. Under this Platonic view, demanding verifiable facts is equivalent to staring at shadows on a wall. You become so obsessed with the scattered data points that you fail to recognize the massive entities casting them. This classical perspective directly opposes modern Western analytical philosophy. The modern standard insists that any claim to truth must be strictly grounded in logical positivism and empirical data. Modern analysis requires proof because unverifiable truths are not considered profound insights. They are viewed as catastrophic analytical liabilities that lead to deeply flawed policy. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Your support really means a lot and helps me keep creating content for you all. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The deliberate rejection of positivism gives speculative analysis its power. By discarding the need for evidence, the model allows intuition and teleology to dictate the facts. Returning to the logic tree, we see the moment of structural failure. When the truth vector extends past the verifiable data, the model plunges into speculation. To fill this space, it introduces unverified esoteric forces, attributing events to the hidden influence of secret societies. The model claims, for instance, that Jesuit forces control global systems from the Vatican. This is eschatological mapping without evidence, assigning massive geopolitical power to an institution based on speculative historical patterns. The framework also rebrands observable political expansion, like the Greater Israel Project, into a concept it terms Pax Judaica. Here, verifiable territorial objectives are replaced by sweeping narratives of overarching conspiracy. The ultimate teleological claim of this model is that all these transnational forces are working in concert to drive the Middle East and the world toward a unified AI surveillance state. This creates a closed epistemological loop. Because the theory focuses entirely on a destined endgame, it becomes completely immune to factual disproof. No amount of contradictory data can break the logic, because the logic rejects data entirely. Driven by this closed loop, the model generates extreme eschatological conclusions for the year 2026. First, it predicts the escalating conflict will devolve into a severe military quagmire, forcing the United States to initiate a national draft. Finally, it outputs its most volatile prediction. The ultimate trajectory of this war will result in the physical destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The contrast is stark. The model's early predictions regarding choke points were highly accurate because they relied on game theory. But as the timeline extends, the teleological endpoints become radically unstable. Purely data-driven analysis certainly possesses blind spots regarding human imagination and political will. But abandoning facts for speculative truth does not cure those blind